Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are continuing our discussion of the second canto, the 10th, the last chapter. So with this chapter, we will be now, what we are wanting to do is we are wanting to understand how the Srimad Bhagavatam is being structured in the remaining 8 cantos. The remaining 10 cantos. Now, what we do learn is that there are 10 different divisions of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and those 10 divisions are interspersed and are dealt with in the different cantos. And we also learned from the previous week's discussion that while it is being shared here about the different incarnations of the Lord and the interactions of the devotees with the Lord, etc., what they have done is they've explained the different topics except for the Summum Bonum. The Summum Bonum is the 10th canto. It is basically a description of Krishna's activities. Except for that, everything else has been described in the form of sometimes direct explanations, sometimes there are inferences, sometimes there are stories. So there are different types of dealing with the same topic. The 10th canto is where they are really focusing on dealing with it at a much more and sharing things far more elaborately. And the reason is because the whole purpose of the Srimad Bhagavatam is for us to understand that for us to understand the purport of the statement of Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, which is being talked about in the first canto, third chapter, 28th verse. So Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, where Krishna is the avatari, Krishna is the origin of all the other avatars, Vrindavan is the origin of all the other rasas, and everything is contained within the rasas exhibited in Vrindavan, and everything else is different variations of the rasas found here in Vrindavan. All of this is being dealt with in how the Srimad Bhagavatam is also arranged in terms of the different cantos. So you have the different incarnations, you have different leelas, different interactions with the devotees, but then a lot of focus has been put on the 10th canto. In fact, Srila Prabhupada wanted to devote 50% of the Srimad Bhagavatam purports to the 10th canto, and then the 50% to the rest of the 11 cantos. And the reason why he wanted to do that was because that would do justice to the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam in terms of focusing on Krishna and his pastimes, as seen in the 10th canto. Yeah, one moment. So what we want to do is we want to also have an understanding that this particular canto, which is a second canto, is setting the stage for discussion of the rest of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the previous chapter, we saw the main essence of Srimad Bhagavatam being broken down into 4 verses. It is somewhat conveying the same message as the 15:15, where Krishna says, the purpose of everything is himself, where he says in 15:15 of the Bhagavad Gita is considered to be the Paribhasha Sutra, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. The most important verse in the Bhagavad Gita is 15:15, where Krishna talks about him being the origin, the middle, and the end, and the fact that everything comes from him. He is the origin, remembrance, forgetfulness, all of these, and he's situated in everybody's heart. All of that is being dealt with in that particular verse. That was also seen in the 4 verses of the previous chapter. Now, we are going to go through the 10 different topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. The 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam are spoken of very early on by Srila Shukadev Goswami, and he basically talks about the following. The first verse of this chapter is, the translation is, Sri Shukadev Goswami said, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 10 divisions of statements regarding the following: the creation of the universe, sub-creation, planetary systems, protection by the Lord, the creative impetus, the change of manus, the science of God, returning home back to Godhead, and the summum bonum. Now, these 10 different topics are dealt with in many cantos, not in a sequence, but these are the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we want to understand that these are topics that are dealt with in many cantos. They are basically, again and again, they reintroduce these particular topics and they talk about it. They also introduce the very foundational principle of the 4 verses that we spoke of in the previous 4 verses, the Chatushloki of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, that is being dealt with throughout Srimad Bhagavatam. So we need to basically understand the Srimad Bhagavatam through both ideas. One, the 4 verses that we spoke of in the previous discussion of the ninth chapter, and then the 10 different topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam as being discussed here. All of these topics are being interspersed throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is just not one or the other. Yeah. Now, what are these topics? Again, we spoke of the creation of the universe, subcreation, planetary systems, protection by the Lord, the creative impetus, the manus, science of God, returning home back to Godhead, and the summum bonum. Verse 2 talks about isolation of the 10th canto. Yeah? Isolation of the 10th canto. Why are they isolating? They're isolating because they want to focus and highlight the activities of Krishna. So the second verse says, to isolate the transcendence of the summum bonum, the symptoms of the rest are described sometimes by Vedic inference, sometimes by direct explanation, and sometimes by summary explanations given by the great sages. Yeah? These are basically, the idea is that if you want to talk about and focus on one single topic, which is supposed to be the most, then you basically isolate that topic, expand on it, and then the rest of it, you basically use different ways to explain them in a concise manner so that you can get the message across. Yeah. But the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam, you will notice them throughout. So it's just not in one canto or the other. It's very important for us to accept that fact as well, that we're going to be reading about it again and again. Now, the first verse, the remaining 7 verses, there are 7 verses in this chapter. 7 verses describe the 10 different topics. So we are starting with the first. Okay? 7 verses are describing the 10 different topics. We are starting with the first. The first is the verse 3. The elementary creation of 16 items of matter, namely the 5 elements, fire, water, land, air, and sky, sound, form, taste, smell, touch, and the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and mind is known as sarga. Sarga. The word that is being used here is sarga. To describe matter, they are using the word sarga. There is a certain state, and the state of matter involves the following. The state of matter involves the following. What does matter involve? Matter involves the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and sky. Yeah? It involves the functions of these 5 elements because they control certain functions, they have certain characteristics. Basically, the characteristic of earth is to be able to identify the presence of earth as having a sum total of all elements. So you're able to smell earth. Yeah? Aren't we seeing this basically? Yeah? When we want to identify the elements, one primary element, which is the earth element, the earth element has a distinct characteristic of us being able to smell it. You can smell earth. And this is distinctly true if you were to come to India and there's rains, and after rain, you would see a lot of, what I would call as, the wonderful scent of the earth being, wafting around. Especially in Vrindavan, you can basically experience it. You have a very distinct smell. Now, the smell, the particular essence of the earth element is to be able to smell. The particular essence of the water element is to be able to taste. You cannot smell water. You can taste water, you can see it, you can feel it, but you cannot, you can even hear it. You can hear it, but you can't smell. You can't smell it. You can't really smell. The water is supposed to be odorless. Yeah? And then the next is fire. Fire has where you can't smell it, you can't taste it. You can see it. You can see it, you can feel it. If you come in touch with fire, you have the ability to be scorched, You can feel that there's something called fire. You can even hear fire in terms of the noise of fire. There can be a certain kind of sound that comes when fire is practically, blazing. The other part is air. You can't see Vayu. Vayu Tattva, you can't see it, but you can feel it, you can hear it. Sometimes, especially in Vrindavan, and this is an experience that happens all the time, when there's a storm in Vrindavan, in our home, we are on the 4th floor, we are on the top floor of a building, and we have a lot of access to the surroundings. In other words, there's a lot of opening, there's ventilation. So when there is a storm, you should see the life of the storm like an entity in Vrindavan. You will hear the storm uprooting things. You will see the tables and the chairs, all heavy stuff being moved around, just like nothing. And you will hear the sound. You'll hear the sound. It'll be as if there's an entity. You will see things just being unplugged. This is Vrindavan storm. It's very powerful. It's almost like an entity. There are entities. There are Rudras. The function of the Rudra is to create a storm. But for you to really witness it, you need to see it in Vrindavan. It's just quite a sight. Yeah, blazing. You can just see water pouring in, and it's just like a description of everything is so conscious here that even the storm has so much life. It's an entity. You can almost feel that there's someone there who is basically blazing through and pushing air and doing all of these things. So you can actually feel Vayu. You can hear Vayu. You can't see. You can't see. You can't smell. Yeah, and you can't taste. Now, one of the most important functions of the Akash Tattva, which is the last Tattva, is it holds everything together. It holds everything together. That's why the Akash Tattva, the Tattva of sound, is the beginning of everything. Sound has the quality, we call it ether in English, like we speak on, we have just made a statement onto ether. It should come true. We've just spoken into ether. Ether, Akash Tattva, is the specific tattva that a guru will be very predominated by. And why is it so? Because it is basically sound energy. And as a consequence, if someone has a lot of Akash Tattva, which means Guru Tattva is very high, they have the ability to convey ideas. And those ideas will have the ability to transform people's hearts because it has the ability to hold everything together, bring people together. So there's a certain tendency of creating union between the soul and God, which is given Akash Tattva. That's why mantras fall in the category of Akash Tattva. So these are 5 material elements. But these material elements, the 5 material elements, have specific functions that we spoke of taste, smell, taste, sight, touch, which is the feeling, the touching part, and then sound, the ability to hear. And then there are senses that are associated with them as well, particular senses, or rather the senses of the eyes, ear, nose, tongue, skin, and mind. Just realize all of this is called matter. It's all inert. It is inert. That is why it's called sarga. It is called sarga because it is inert. On its own, it can't do anything. It's inert. And this is the reason why we call it inert matter. You can call it primordial matter. It's primordial nature. You need something to make this work. You need an interference. You need a catalyst for it to transform itself. So when there is a catalyst, then the transformed nature of matter is called visarga. What this verse is explaining. This verse is saying that there is inert matter, which is called sarga. When the Lord is glancing, he is practically impregnating this inert matter with the modes of nature. Modes of nature is nothing but consciousness, isn't it? 3 different modes of nature, and entities possessing the 3 different modes of nature or 3 different levels of consciousness, they have the ability to come in matter, and based on their consciousness, they start doing things in the realm of matter. So someone based on their consciousness is destructive. Someone based on their consciousness, they create destructive aspects. Someone who is based on this consciousness has the ability to preserve. Someone based on their consciousness has the ability to create. So you have the interaction between sarga, which is inert matter, okay, which is composed of the 5 gross elements, It is also subtle. All the senses, everything. This is considered to be inert. It has no life. And it can be separated from consciousness. So there are two different levels of separation in death. Let's understand it now, because we understand ourselves through the body, because that's very clear to us. So the body being separated from the subtle body, this is one level of separation. Then the subtle body roams around and again has an opportunity to enter into a physical frame, or given an opportunity, the subtle body basically is introduced into, the whole concept of what we would call as the union of the father and mother, which brings the subtle body again into being. So what we have here is there is gross body. Separation from the gross body is death. Then there is separation of the subtle body from the soul. That is liberation. Liberation is not liberating oneself from the gross body. Liberation is liberating oneself from the subtle body. So there are two different levels of separation that occur in one's existence. One existence and one separation is separation from the gross body. And then at the time of liberation, Shiva, the same Lord Shiva, comes as a guru, and he separates the subtle body from the gross body, the soul. So we have to dissolve the subtle body. We are also being separated from the gross body. These are two different types of death. Yeah? There are two different types of death. These are two different types of death. So one could be basically in a gross body, and if they identify too much with the gross body, then they are basically quite imprisoned by one conditioning. And then there is the second level of conditioning, which is both of these bodies are problematic, and they're composed of inert matter. The gross body is gross matter, the subtle body is subtle matter. Both have the same ingredients: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. The five elements are either in the subtle or in the gross state. Yeah? So there has to be separation from both for one to actually call themselves being liberated. That is the separation of material energy. So when one is completely engrossed by, covered by the gross and the material and the subtle body, then the mind has control over their activities. You see, when we say that the mind has control over the individual soul when one is identifying completely over the body. So when one is advanced, the mind has no play. They have absolutely, the mind cannot even dictate any term when one is advanced. The mind does not have a choice. The mind has to go along with the choice of the soul. That is the advancement of spirituality. The advanced spiritual being has the ability to subdue, or rather dissolve, the existence of the mind. The mind comes in touch with false ego in the mode of goodness. That's why if you want to resolve issues of life, come to the mode of goodness. You cannot resolve anything in the other modes. Why? Because the mind will not allow you to resolve anything in the other modes, because the mind itself came to being in the mode of goodness. So if you want to solve problems of the mind, you need to be in the mode of goodness, because it came into being in the mode of goodness. That is the reason why there's such emphasis on the mode of goodness, for us to be able to function and have control over life. Otherwise, the mind is in charge. Now, the liberation of the mind, liberation of the false ego, all of that is basically liberation from the subtle body. As one advances in spiritual science, one identifies with the eternal spiritual identity, then they do not listen to the mind. The mind has no control. The mind cannot dictate to them that, okay, chanting is boring. Mind cannot dictate to them saying that some other activity is very interesting. Let's go and check this out. Let's go and check that out. You liked it a few years back. Why don't you go and check that out again? Because maybe that's still interesting. The mind cannot really make any dictation to one who has completed anartha nivirti. That is why it is called nivirti, to be free. Why is it called to be free? It is called you're free from the influence of matter. When do you become free from the influence of matter? In the mode of goodness. Higher and higher and higher the mode of goodness, greater the freedom from matter. That's why it's called Anartha Nivrti. Anartha Nivrti essentially means passion and ignorance. That's why Srimad Bhagavatam says, Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu. Abhadreshu is that which is inauspicious. What is inauspicious? The lower modes of nature are inauspicious because the lower modes of nature incarcerate us. This is a subtle incarceration. The mind gains complete control. The mind starts dictating to the soul that it's even more powerful than the soul. Yeah? So that is the reason why the process of self-realization of different stages requires the coming of receiving faith, Ado Shraddha. Then we come in Sangha, there's Sadhu Sangha. Then we engage in Bhajana Kriya. All of these, receiving of faith in the heart from the Guru, which is practically receiving Sambandha Gyan. The Guru has knowledge about his relationship with Krishna. The Guru has the ability to deliver that knowledge into our heart through his Vani. That is why Guru Mukha Padmavakya Chitete Kuryaikya. Guru Mukha Padmavakya Chitete Kuryaikya. So as a consequence, we basically come in touch with the Guru's Vakya, and the Guru's Vakya contains his Sambandha. That Sambandha, that relationship of Krishna, which the Guru has, enters into our consciousness through sound vibration. That relationship of the Guru has the ability to practically establish our relationship and grow the creeper of the relationship and everything. So words of passion and ignorance, nashta prayeshis, because it incarcerates us. It incarcerates us whilst we are in the planet, whilst we are on the planet, it incarcerates us and it keeps us in material nature. So the lower modes are highly inauspicious. That's why Srimad Bhagavatam uses the word nashta prayeshu abhadreshu, unwanted, inauspicious influences. All of these are removed when you come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. When you basically come in touch with faith, and then that faith which is being given contains the relationship of whoever is sharing things and inspiring us. It contains the relationship of that person with Krishna. And automatically that relationship enters into our hearts and starts creating transformations. And those transformations become the bedrock, the foundation for us to be able to rise higher. Now, here's the verse. This verse is saying there is sarga, which is inert matter. The Lord is glancing. When he is glancing, he is also inserting, impregnating this inert matter with the modes of nature. And depending on the nature of the people who are being impregnated into inert matter, they start acting. And that is when inert matter becomes dynamic. Yeah. Until then, it is static. So there is something called visarga. Visarga in Sanskrit means it is something that makes changes. Yeah. It is called visarga because it changes. Sarga, visarga. You basically are introducing a catalyst, and the catalyst practically has a transformative effect on what was originally thought of in one way. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma, he compares the soul's existence as comparing water and the transformation of water into ice by coming in touch with very low temperature. Now, what is the transformation? Water gets transformed into ice by coming in touch with low temperatures. Yeah, so this is basically a transformation. So the ice in this example is visarga. Ice in the example is visarga. Is there a difference between water and ice? Technically, the answer is no. Ice can melt and it becomes water. But is there an apparent difference in terms of observation, in terms of shape, form, etc.? The answer is yes, because we really don't tend to call ice water, do we? We don't. We call ice, ice, and we call water, water. But water is sarga. When it comes in touch with low temperature, it transforms into ice. That is visarga. This transformation is brought with a catalyst. This is the same example. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that the soul originally is to be compared to water, but the soul has come in touch with a catalyst and it has been transformed into ice, like water transformed into ice. Because it has remained in the state of ice for a very long time, the soul starts imagining that it is ice. It can't realize that in reality it's water. It has forgotten its original state. So again, when the soul, which is compared here to ice, comes in touch with optimum temperature, room temperature, the original condition, it melts and regains its constituent nature. Yeah, the consistency comes back. So water, you can say the nature of water is to flow, that water starts flowing. It is not inert, it is not in a particular shape, it is basically is not going to be sitting in one place. You see the water retains its fluid nature and starts moving. So similarly, the soul has been transformed by coming constantly in touch with material nature. What we are doing in Krishna consciousness is to stop that business by educating ourselves and understanding that there are ways and means to exist on the planet without really being in touch with material nature. So what are we doing? We are introducing what we call a visarga in our situation as well. What is the transformation that is occurring? For us, the transformation that is occurring is coming in touch with Krishna, isn't it? It's such a simple, lucid, beautiful philosophy. It's so simple and straight. We came in touch with something and we changed into something else. Because we changed into something else and we remained in the state for such a long time, we started imagining that that's who. Now, because of the mercy of the Guru is practically bringing us back, and he is putting us in touch with the original state. The original state, which is in abundance, is Krishna. Yeah, we are very minuscule. Tatastha Shakti has the intrinsic quality of being very minuscule, minute, I would say very easily transformed or influenced because of the minute nature. And as a consequence, it can either go into material nature or it can go into spiritual nature. So what is it which our acharyas are doing? They're employing this particular verse in our philosophy very clearly. The Lord is glancing into material nature. He's glancing into inert matter, transforming inert matter. And because of the transformation of inert matter through the material nature, that is occurring through coming in touch with the modes of nature. What is the meaning of the modes of nature? The modes of nature in this example means 3 different types of consciousness interspersed. So there are jivas with the mode of goodness. There are jivas in the mode of passion. There are jivas in the mode of ignorance. When they come in touch with inert matter, they create their own forms. It is like giving a piece of paper and a pen to 3 different children. Depending on their own consciousness, the child is going to make a certain kind of caricature. They're going to, kind of sketch in a certain way. They're going to paint in a certain way. All of this is going to happen by way of their consciousness. They're going to do it by because of the consciousness. In a similar fashion, inert matter coming in touch with the modes of nature starts transforming, and shapes and forms start coming in play based on consciousness. Who is going to manage the 3 different types of consciousness? You have the 3 different types of Gunavataras. You have Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Yeah? So Lord Brahma manages the creative impulse. Lord Vishnu preserves. Lord Shiva destroys. He practically manages the 3 different types of consciousness that is intrinsic to the 3 gunas. So the 3 gunas need managers, and they have the 3 different avatars. This is how it's being done. So it's a very, very well thought out, very beautifully structured, extraordinarily organized universe with everything anticipated, but which is very highly, beautifully controlled with consciousness. Yeah? Imagine the Lord basically introduces consciousness into inert nature, and then consciousness basically starts transforming in all the stuff that we read about in terms of earth, water, fire, ether, air, all of that gets transformed. Yeah? Similarly, when the jiva, who has practically been impinged with all these things for many, many millions of years, he comes again in touch with the Lord. This time he's coming in touch with the Lord in this particular yuga through holy names. He comes in touch with the Lord through the holy names, and by coming in touch with the Lord through the holy names, the ice is melting. That's what is happening here. Yeah? The transformed state of the ice is now being melted so that we realize who we are. This is Krishna consciousness. Does it make sense? We are coming in touch with Krishna. He is the origin. He is the summum bonum. He is like the million or billion or trillion times more powerful source of transformation. And as a consequence, when the jiva comes in touch with Krishna, in a nice, beautiful way, as organized by scripture, then we find that the ice is melting. We suddenly recognize that, hey, this is who I am. I like this. Yeah. 1 year of Krishna consciousness practically makes one realize that they can't unless they really figure out who they are. Just 1 year. Why is this? It is such a powerful science, is because we have come in touch with the original Krishna. We're coming in touch with Krishna in such powerful ways. And the ice is melting. Because the ice is melting in such an amazing way, we are slowly, steadily, over a period of time, recognizing who we are. So this is basically a very, very powerful way to understand that this is how Srimad Bhāgavatam is making us realize that the ice needs to be melted, because this is not our original state. We imagine that we are ice because we've been in this frozen condition for so long. In reality, we are very fluid. Coming in touch with Krishna is practically all we need. Yeah. So this verse practically is telling us of sarga and visarga. There's inert matter, then there's the coming into touch of inert matter with consciousness, and then there is a transformation that occurs. Then the process is reversed in Krishna consciousness, when due to the mercy of the Guru and Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we are again coming in touch with Krishna, and we are coming back to our original state. Yeah, simple, very simple, lucid, straightforward concept. Text 4, the right situation for the living entities is to obey the laws of the Lord and thus be in perfect peace of mind under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The manus and the laws are meant to give right direction in life. The impetus for activity is the desire for fruitive work. Here, this verse is talking about the other topic, the second topic of Srimad Bhāgavatam, which talks about the manus and their reign. Yeah, and you will see the different lineages coming from Manu throughout. You will see how he is giving laws, how he is managing, what is he doing for the children whom he is responsible for. Yeah. So in this verse, we are literally talking about the fact that the manus and laws are meant to give right direction in life. So this is also a direct indication that the manusmriti and the coming of the jivas into this world, first the jivas are put into this world, and then laws are given. The lawgiver is Manu, and then we are supposed to follow those laws. Those laws practically allow the jivas to fall into different categories of varnas based on their consciousness. So this is basically a description of division of society into varnashram based on the laws of Manu, Manusmriti. And the idea is that the Brahmanas are the head, the Kshatriyas are the limbs and the chest, you see. The Shudra and the Vaishyas are the belly of the Lord. You see, there are 4 different divisions. The whole idea of peaceful society is cooperation between the different parts of the Purusha. When there is cooperation between the different parts of the Purusha, of the Lord, then there's automatically peace, because everybody is working towards and aligned towards the same purpose of pleasing the Lord. So how does one organize themselves in that regard? That is being spoken of in this verse. And here we are talking about the Manu being the giver of law. And he practically is the giver of law for the Manvantara. And the Manusmriti itself is practically being given to us for the purpose that the Varnashram can be smooth. And because of the Varnashram, the people with 4 different types of consciousness, here we are talking about 4 different types. 4 Varnas: Brahmanas, mode of goodness; Kshatriyas, passion; Vaishyas, passion mixed with ignorance; and then there's ignorance, Shudras. These 4 Varnas are based on consciousness. If there was ever a successful experiment with division of society through consciousness, that has happened through the blessings of Srila Prabhupada. Yeah? Nobody basically came up and so powerfully introduced this division of society according to consciousness as Srila Prabhupada did. Yeah? He practically did not say that you have to be born and you have to have certain pre-existing conditions. There has got to be a certain kind of qualification for you to come into, the Krishna conscious society. There was absolutely nothing. He created the institution, he set rules and regulations, And when you create an institution with certain sets of rules and regulations, you will attract people to that institution who belong there. Please understand that we go to institutions based on our consciousness as well. Yeah. If you create an institution, a certain institution with a certain kind of consciousness will attract people. For example, if you consider the armed forces as being an institution, the armed forces attract Kshatriyas because the armed forces have an objective. They have a certain code and they have certain kinds of activity. They have certain objectives. All of that fits into the mindset of proper Kshatriyas. They join the armed forces. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada created the institution. He laid out purpose. He said purity is the essence. He basically said that this is what you need to do. You need to become pure, and you need to basically, have access to all of what we call Krishna consciousness. This will attract the right kind of people. So all the divisions of labor, so on and so forth, that is going on, which is quite unnatural, because it's all being done specifically. It's unnatural because it is basically it is not aligned with the purpose of pleasing the Lord and cooperating with the ideas of the Lord. Now, when you do that in Srila Prabhupada's institution, it's a very powerful concept. It practically cuts across, and you basically can go from one part of the world to the other, and you will find such commonality amongst people who practically come from different races, different economic backgrounds, different social backgrounds, gender. There's so much commonality that you could practically go into any part of the world, and immediately in 5 minutes, you could have a conversation with someone. Now, this is basically because there is a certain set of rules, and that's being followed. So that was also the original objective. When the Lord impregnated the universe with jivas and consciousness came in play, someone had to give them rules of the game. The rules of the game came from Manu. That is going to be seen throughout Srimad Bhāgavatam in different places, especially in the 6th, perhaps some in the 8th canto. We will see the description of the Manus and the lineages, etc. Yeah, we're going to see that. So this verse practically that there is cooperation between the different parts of the Purusha, and that cooperation is practically managed by laws, and those laws are given by Manu. Now, can we really follow the laws of Manu in this particular circumstance in the few years that we have on the planet? The answer is no. We don't have the ability to do much. There are rules for getting out of bed. There are rules for placing your feet on the ground. There are going near the well and drawing water. I know people who know mantras to chant while going and drawing water from the well at different times of the day. Yeah, you have no idea how complicated it can get and how much information there is if you really want to align yourself with Vedic, life. Srila Prabhupada practically cut to the chase. He practically cut all that is not required. He took the essence, and then he also further modified the essence to fit a rather global audience. He knew the different cultures. He understood how things are going to be. It was simply fascinating to see how this was arranged, because he practically gave a system that the whole world could adapt to, with some minor adjustments in terms of, you might go, and then the devotees in South America would like to dress the deities in a certain way, perhaps. You go to South India, they have a different feature. Have you seen deities? You should see the darshan videos of Krishna Prema Prabhu, which is probably on YouTube. And you will see that the different deities of Radha and Krishna around the world, they all have a local feature. You will see the deity a little Mexican. You will see the deities in Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh looking a little bit like what they would prefer, what they would call as beauty. Then you have North India, South India, Gujarat, Italy, Germany. You have so many different places, and all these deities also bring some local flavor. And the local flavor comes from the devotees who worship, because they have a certain sense of how this should be, and then they do it. So there are certain small changes here and there, but then you will overall notice that there is a thrust which is common. Srila Prabhupada practically cut to the chase. He just never ever wanted us to waste time. He gave us a system based on Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's teaching. Bhaktivinoda Thakur identified 5 different sevas out of 64. He said you have to have sadhu sangha. Without sadhu sangha, there cannot be inspiration. Inspiration comes in touch with those who are inspired. If you don't come in touch with those who are inspired, those who carry a lot of inspiration in their hearts, then how is it possible for us to become inspired? Yeah. Aindra Prabhu, you might have seen those YouTube videos. He used to say that if you are chanting Namaprad and you do, you're going to distribute that level of consciousness. If you are chanting Namabas, you do Harinam, you're going to distribute Namabas. If you are in Prema proceeding towards, there's a lot of purity and there's a lot of focus and greed, then you will distribute that when you do Harinam. Yeah, he used to use the word, if you don't got it, you don't got it. Yeah, that's what he used to say. And this is true, because if you don't have it in you, how can you give? Isn't this just logical? So the idea of coming in touch with sadhus was kept as a primary foundation, because the sadhu has the ability to inspire because they are inspired. The sadhu has the ability to give greed because they are themselves greedy for Krishna's service. They have the ability to inspire us and give us greed for Krishna's service because they carry these traits in their heart. And because they carry it in their hearts, they have the ability to distribute. Yeah. So this is considered to be the first principle. The second is Nama Kirtan, Nama Smaran. You see, if anybody comes to me and talks to me, I would say start with Nama Smaran, Nama Kirtan. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because that is the bedrock. If you have other issues in life, they can be resolved through Nam. Nam is most forgiving. If you have Seva Aparad, you can chant. Because if you chant, Seva Aparad can be removed. Yeah. You can remove Seva Aparad simply because Nam is more forgiving. Nam is so forgiving. So it's good to have Nam as the primary balanced sadhana. That is the reason why it's a Yuga Dharma. Lord Chaitanya says so. His followers are saying so. So we accept it, we do that, and then we are going to benefit. And Sadhu Sangha, in my definition, humble definition, I would say, the way I look at it, I wouldn't really call it as my definition, but it is also a part of what Harinam Chintamani talks about. Sadhu Sangha is all about coming in touch with those who are dependent on Harinam. There's a certain dependence on Harinam. When you practice Sangha and when you practice sadhana, there will be a certain state that you will come to where you will understand that everything is dependent on Nam. Everything is dependent on Nam. You do not need anything complicated in life. You need just your bead bag. Just understanding that basic fact that we are completely dependent on Nam. You see, that dependence is what causes a person to be called a sadhu. If someone has understood that complete dependence on Nam is the answer to everything, that person is a sadhu. This is the definition given by Srila Haridas Thakur to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the definition of Haridas Thakur. So you go to someone who has the ability to give us inspiration to chant Harinam. This is what we do. And then what we also do is we basically practice inspired, and then we come to Srimad Bhāgavatam and come in touch with Krishna, and then we come in touch with the deities, and then we also have a deep desire to come to Vrindavan. Now the point is, or Mayapur, the point is, these 5 principles are the compensation for jivas of not following Varnashram, nor following the rules and regulations of Manu. It's a very simple, straightforward, beautiful compromise, because this is far more powerful, far more efficient, and it is designed for this age. Why is it so important for us to understand that this is designed for us? It is important for us to understand that this is designed for us because this process that has been given by Mahaprabhu requires mercy for us to flourish, because we ourselves are not considered to be very good in anything, and it's a fact. It's a fact. You see, we are not very efficient in so many different ways. We can find out that we do find inefficiencies in the way we exist because we are not good in anything proper. We are dependent completely on mercy. For such people, such as us, who are dependent on mercy, we need a process that is also going to have a foundation on mercy. If it is going to be Manusmriti, if it is going to be the process of Varnashram, etc., then you can imagine the number of rules and regulations that one has to follow. If there's no capacity for such rules and regulations, if there's such dependency on different aspects where you can't really follow those, then we are in trouble. So the process that's been given to us is a mercy-based process. We are Kripa Siddhas. All sadhana is to position ourselves to receive more mercy. That is all we have to do. We have to just position ourselves for more mercy. So this sadhana that we have been given is perfect for this particular age because of all the inefficiencies and lack of knowledge and so on and so forth that is very prevalent, and the complex environment as well. It compensates for everything, and it is mercy-based. The Lord is looking at us and saying, okay, you don't deserve this, but I'm giving it to you. This is a fact. None of us deserve being in Lord Chaitanya's movement. None of us deserve receiving what he is there to give us. None of us can ever claim that we are worthy of such mercy. Nobody can. Yeah? Nobody can. Sri Uddhava, Krishna's relative, who is also his look-alike, he was not qualified. He did not understand Braja Bhakti. Mother Devaki and Vasudev in Mathura, they could not qualify for Braja Bhakti. So for us to claim that we can be qualified is preposterous. So we have to understand, at least logically, that we can never be qualified. If people who are as exalted as the mother and father of Krishna and his own relatives, they are not qualified, then how are we qualified for what has been given to us by Lord Chaitanya? So this is completely mercy, and this is perfect. This is really perfect because it fits in with all our inefficiencies. Yeah, it fits in with everything that we are in this world, and it is beautiful because it's not dependent on us. It's dependent on the mercy of the Guru, and the Guru is ever merciful. Yeah, the Guru is ever merciful. So this is just wonderful, this arrangement that has been made. Most conducive, most proper. You can't ask for anything better than what we've already been given. There's nothing better than this. Nothing. They have just practiced down sideways. They have understood everything about us, and they're saying this is the best system. And then they're also making arrangements to pick us up. Yeah, we are going to be picked up. We are going to be picked up, not because we are qualified. We're going to be picked up because we somehow learned how to beg properly. We're going to be picked up because somehow we knock sense into our head to understand that we are beggars. We're going to be picked up because our entire sadhana is to position ourselves in that way. I am not making this statement from a position of low self-esteem. I am not making this statement from a position of lack of confidence. I'm making this statement from an idea that's very practical. If we just observe ourselves, we even struggle with the most basic of instructions. So how could we even demand and think that we could handle this and be given the personal service of the divine couple in the realm of Raja? How could we even think that we qualify for that? So I'm not speaking from a position of low self-esteem. I'm not. Yeah? I'm not. I'm merely saying that this is factual, and we need to accept it. We need to accept that we have to somehow position ourselves for proper begging. That's our business. That is our business. Yeah, that's what we do. We are all a family of beggars. In a good sense, we are begging for prema. We are begging for service to the divine couple. Yeah, we are wanting to be introduced into the highest realm in even the Vaikunta planetary system. So we kind of have our eyes on a very lofty goal, and we have been given mercy for us to reach that very lofty goal. But we need to understand our position that we are bound by Kripa. We are not sadhana siddhas. We can't claim we are. Even if you chant 128 rounds a day, you cannot claim you're a sadhana siddha. Sadhana itself cannot qualify one for service at the lotus feet of the divine couple. You cannot. So we can't claim we are sadhana siddhas. If we are nitya siddhas, we are liberated, then you don't need to attend my class. You're well off. Yeah. And then lastly comes the Kripa Siddha category. The Kripa Siddha category is where we belong. Yeah. The Kripa Siddha category is where we belong. We belong to the category of those who receive mercy because that is what the whole plan is. You're being given a set of rules by Manu and you can't follow those rules, but everything you do here is going to incarcerate us even more. And then you have been given a position and you're also been given a lofty goal of direct service to the summum bonum. Who could ask for this? Yeah. See, this is the intelligence of the predecessors. The predecessor acharyas, they were so intelligent, and you could observe their intelligence by their life. The moment they found that there was such a lofty, beautiful goal that was attainable, and someone was ready to guide them and give them tutelage, They dropped everything and took the opportunity and practically cut everything else out so that they could just focus singularly on that life's goal. You should observe that. All the Goswamis, they all came from extraordinarily powerful, rich heritage, rich families, good positions. But the moment they knew that someone was going to give them prema, someone was going to basically lead them on to Goloka, and the Lord himself had appeared, that was it. They were able to cut themselves out of everything, and then they surrendered. Yeah, this is really, it's amazing. You see, even for example, Sukadev Goswami, Srila Sukadev Goswami, he practically was born and he was already liberated. So he had no use for purification through samskaras. He just walked away because he was already what we would call Brahmabhuta Prasannatma. He was already very satisfied, transcendently situated. And then he came in touch with Srimad Bhāgavatam by the mercy of his father. And that practically became his obsession. So if you notice, people used to walk away those days because they had a goal. And they found that what they were pursuing was not worth it. They found that here's something even better. Why would I spend time pushing against something that is really not worth it? Or there have been quite a few people in my neighborhood who have achieved it. There are neighbors who have it. There are people across the road who have it. Yeah. And I also read about the fact that who have it, they also lose it because it's just a matter of time before duality kicks in. Why have such a goal which constantly is changes, and then which also is a cause of a lot of grief because we get attached to the outcomes? Yeah. Now here's something that they used to do. They were very intelligent. They used to basically read scripture with faith. They used to accept what was in scripture, and they used to carve out a lifestyle that would give them maximum opportunity to live scripture. Living scripture is very different from reading. Living scripture requires commitment. It practically is a circumstance where one has ingested scripture and they are practically starting to allow scripture to modify their life to such an extent that now they're living scripture. Yeah, it's a big deal. And there are those who do that. We have seen that. So it's quite fascinating. It's quite fascinating to see that we have been given this opportunity. But here, the Lord is describing that the Bhagavatam is going to show us that yes, there is Manu, and he has given rules and regulations, and then he is the one who is supposed to direct the souls. So the Bhagavatam is talking about all of this to give us a sense that that's where you came from. You came from being impregnated into material nature after the last creation. You came from practically a situation of following the rules and regulations. And here we are under circumstances that we have a different opportunity of being able to break out of this pattern. And that opportunity is based on something far more powerful. We're going to come in touch with Krishna himself through the Bhagavatam, through the name, through the sadhus, through the deity, through the dham. We're coming in touch with Krishna. And Krishna is practically taking, what I would say is initiative in bringing us back. It's quite fascinating. Now, that is the verse here. This is the second verse that is talking about one of the topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. You coming up a lot in Bhagavatam. He is the giver of laws. Why? Because he is the one who has to manage the consciousness of people. Someone has to give them rules and regulations. So he is the giver. He is the king. He comes here. Yeah. Text 5. The science of God describes the incarnations of the personality of Godhead and his different activities together with the activities of his great devotees. Now, this is very powerful. This verse number 5, is talking about the fact that, yes, we spoke of the Lord impregnating inert matter and acting with inert matter and thereby creating karma and then starting the process of the karmic cycle. Then we spoke of the fact that the jivas have to be managed. So you have the guna avataras. Then we spoke of the fact that the jivas have to live a certain kind of lifestyle. And as a consequence, you have the manus giving rules and regulations. Now we are saying you either do that or you study the lifestyles of the devotees of the Lord when he appears, because the Lord appears in different incarnations. And then there are devotees of the Lord who practically rejected the norm, who practically rejected the status quo, and they adopted a somewhat of a rebellious stance based on their age, and they started pursuing devotion to the Lord. For example, Prahalad Maharaj. Yeah, what was the status quo of Prahalad Maharaj? The status quo of Prahalad Maharaj that he was born in a family of demons. That was his status quo. But he rebelled. He rebelled against that, and he came in touch with the Lord. Now we study about the incarnations of the Lord and the interaction of the devotees of the Lord with his leelas, and how we can make our way back. The alternative of breaking down and the visarga. Remember what I said earlier. Our original state can be compared to water. Water is fluid by nature. When water comes in touch with low into ice, when that low temperature ice stays in that condition for some time, then we don't call it water anymore, we call it ice. How do we break it down? We bring it back to the original condition by bringing in touch that particular block of ice with higher temperature, normal temperature. So this verse talks about how devotees of the Lord and his different leelas, as described in the Srimad Bhāgavatam, are showing us how that ice could be broken back and we could go back to the original condition. What were the conditions under which Dhruva, Prahalad, the other devotees interacted with the Lord? What were the difficulties? What were the conditioning? They were very young. They were not very intelligent because they were not very old. In other words, if age is considered to be, as one age's wisdom grows, if that were to be a statement, then they were quite young. They were very young children. And then they had all kinds of disadvantages in one sense because they were very young. Prahlad Maharaj was born in a family of demons, so there was really no support from ancestors. Yeah, you can say that, sometimes we have good things are done by the ancestors, then the descendants also, kind of enjoy and basically have a good time. There was no contribution by the ancestors in Prahlad Maharaj's situation. How did he break out of his original state? By the coming of a guru. Narad Muni practically introduced the catalyst. He spoke and preached to Srila Prahlad Maharaj whilst he was in the womb of his mother. By preaching to him, Guru's Sambandha, Vani, goes into the heart of Prahlad Maharaj. And that ice has already melted. By the time he comes out of his mother's womb, he is already a full-fledged devotee because Narad Muni, Sri Narad Muni, practically melts the ice and brings forth the real personality within. It's fascinating. Yeah? So now that is what we are learning from the Srimad Bhāgavatam. This is also one of the topics. And that is being spoken of in this verse. Yeah? How do you go against the status quo? How do you go against what is norm? That we ought to learn from the devotees who went through so many challenges and moved forward despite challenges. Okay, that's being spoken of here as well in verse 5. Verse 6, the merging of the living entity along with this conditional living tendency with the mystic lying down of Mahavishnu is called the winding up of the cosmic manifestation. Liberation is the permanent situation of the form of the living entity after he gives up the changeable, gross and subtle material bodies. So this is also a topic. In the Srimad Bhāgavatam, we talk about alignment with the Lord and the giving up of both the gross and the subtle bodies. Yeah? Both the gross and the subtle bodies. This is also a topic of the Srimad Bhāgavatam. Out of the 10 different topics, this is also one of the topics that comes up. Text 7. The Supreme One, who is celebrated as the Supreme Being or Supreme Soul, is the supreme source of the cosmic manifestation, as well as its reservoir and winding up. Thus, he is the supreme fountainhead, the absolute truth. So this is basically the summum bonum, yeah, the absolute truth, which is the topic of Srimad Bhāgavatam. So he is the source, he is the reservoir where it rests, and he is also the reservoir after the fact. He is the supreme fountainhead, the absolute truth. This is basically a description which is also given in the Srimad Bhāgavatam, which means this is the summum bonum that is being described, the feature of absolute truth. The individual person, which is verse 8, possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adi. The individual controlling deity of the senses is called Adi Devik. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adi Bhautik person. So here we are talking about the three different types of personalities. And the three different types of personalities are the Adi Atmik, basically the controller of the senses. The soul, which is us, we are controllers of our senses. We have been given these senses and we control them. Yeah. And then there's a higher controller. The higher controller is, even if you choose to wanting to do something, you can't do it, because there's a higher controller who is the Devas, the Adi Daivik, the higher supreme controller, who basically is not going to allow you to do it. So someone, for example, wants to see, but they can't see. Yeah. There's a higher controller who has prevented the person from seeing. So the first principle is Adi Atmik, the one who has control over the senses, who basically, the idea is you have a body, so you can use your senses. So you can be considered Adhyatmic. You can misuse the senses. You can use the senses properly. You have control over the senses. However, there are circumstances where things can happen that are beyond the control of the person who is in the body. That is when the demigods basically cause issues. So there are certain functions of the body which just can't work because the demigods have problems with it. Yeah, there's some karma associated as a consequence. There's a demigod who is involved and he is not cooperating. So even though someone has beautiful eyes, they can't see. Even though there's everything appropriate in their eyes, they can't see. Yeah, the dharma of the eyes can't be carried out because their physical part of the eye is quite intact. They're able to open and close the eyelids, which are also controlled by the devas at some time. But they see because there's something going on with the devas. That is Adi Daivik control. Finally, there is Adi Bhautik. Adi Bhautik is basically that which is embodied. So in other words, you also have people of a similar nature who surround us. And as a consequence, you basically also realize about the fact that the material body has its limitations, and then the material body of others also has its limitations. And sometimes we face issues on account of others. These are three different types of kleshas. We talk about Adhyatmic, Adi Daivik, Adi Bhautik kleshas. And the klesha, the word klesha means trouble, disturbance, distortion, pain. And these are different categories of how one experiences karma on the planet. And these different categories are being described here. All three of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being, who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter, is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. After separating the different universes, universal form of the Lord Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance for the first Purusha avatar, entered into each of the separate universes, desiring to lie on the created transcendental water. So the first Purusha is the one who glances and impregnates material nature. The second Purusha is the one who enters into the different material universes and starts controlling and manifesting, and giving the ability to maintain those universes. The third Purusha is the one who practically maintains, which is Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. That supreme person is not impersonal, therefore is distinctively a Nara or a person. Therefore, the transcendental water created from supreme Nara is known as Nara, and because he lies down on that water, he is known as Narayana. So this is another name for Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. Yeah, this water which he is lying on is also considered his sweat. So he is lying on a substance that is created from his own self, that is transcendental. He is lying on his sweat. He is not in touch essentially with material nature, even though he is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And then he is practically looking and creating, because he is the one who has the, what we would call as the navel sprouts, the lotus stem, and then from there you have Lord Brahma and the different planetary systems. Now he is also called Narayana. So Mahavishnu is Narayana. The second Purusha, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, is Narayana. Kshirodakashayi Vishnu can also be called that. The point is that Narayana is the word that is used And that is being described here. The Lord, while lying on his bed of mystic slumber, generated the seminal symbol, golden in hue, through external energy out of his desire to manifest varieties of living entities from himself alone. This is basically the process of creation. And the process of creation is basically described in the Srimad Bhāgavatam. It is also described in the Bhagavad Gita. And we call it Hiranyagarbha. It is golden in color. The manifestation of a universe is golden in color. And then it is impregnated with the Lord's glance. And then interaction occurs. And then through that, you have different living entities interacting with matter, and creation begins, etc. Creation, maintenance, destruction. Yeah. Today, because I have a few things to do today, so I'm probably going to give another 20 minutes for questions. This is verse 13. We will continue from verse 13 onwards when we meet next, because the next few verses are very much related to the process of creation. I will explain verse 13 again in the next week's session. Let's verse 12 this week. Then we'll take it up again. Okay? I'll start with verse 13. So if there are any questions, I would like to take any questions that you may have. I have another 20 minutes, so until 6:30, my time.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. This is
Hare Krishna. Hare
Please
Krishna.
accept my obeisances. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Prabhu, my question is regarding this 5 things based on Bhaktivinoda Thakur's teachings that Srila Prabhupada has proposed. During that explanation, you were explaining that if we are chanting Nam Aprad, then if you preach, then you will be distributing this consciousness. You said. So, how should we purify ourselves, Prabhu? But we can't just, we have to preach around. We can't stop preaching, but if our consciousness is not purified, then how would the preaching process, Prabhu?
Yes, that's the reason why we should follow in the footsteps of Sukadev Goswami. When he started speaking the Srimad Bhāgavatam, he first and foremost said that I'm not the speaker. You see, he steps aside and he says the Lord is the speaker. He allows the activity to be inspired by and controlled by the Lord. Yeah? So that is what we need to do whilst we are trying to share topics of a transcendental nature. We have to understand that we are instruments, and an instrument needs to prepare very prayerfully before they take on the responsibility of acting and presenting themselves to the Lord so that he could use them. Yeah? That is what the instrument is supposed to do. So, yes, we are completely unqualified. We are all in different levels of anarthas. And as a consequence, we may personally not have the ability to help others move forward. But if we learn how to step aside by surrendering to the Guru and Krishna and asking prayerfully to be assisted, understanding how helpless we are, and understanding that we have no qualification, but we are trying to do something and we seek some help, the Guru will take our place and he will assist us in preaching, even though we have no qualifications. This is exactly how Harinam should also be done. Those who do Harinam should learn to do it prayerfully. Before we step out with the cymbals, before we step out with the mridanga, before we find out what is the best raga to be chanting whilst chanting Harinam on the streets, which is wonderful seva, we need to be prayerful. We need to be prayerful. I've mentioned this before. Aindra Prabhu was not just a good kirtaniya. It's not music. He was very deeply absorbed in Nam. That's why his kirtan was transformative. That is why his kirtan reached the 3 corners of the world. And people were becoming inspired because the power of transformation existed in his consciousness because he was holding on to the beads very carefully. Kirtaniyas need to chant and focus on chanting as a primary activity. If they want to have a good impression, in other words, they want to influence, pick up the beat bag. That's where it's supposed to begin. That's where it's supposed to begin. And then once you go out, regardless of how good the music is, there would be instant transformation. This is how we are supposed to operate. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
Good. Any other question or comment that I could address?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Another question, can I wait for others or shall I continue?
On, why don't you just finish? Then I could just go for others.
Okay, Prabhu. So before you began with the verses, you were telling that you will cover, like, the verses cover 7 topics. So I lost track of the verses and the order of your explanations. So how many topics have been covered till now, till verse 13, Prabhu?
Well, basically 7 verses cover 10 topics, and we still have some room. So I think we will go into it subsequently. We'll summarize it. Okay?
Thank you,
We'll
Prabhu.
summarize it. We'll summarize it later.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. I'm just going to take a few chat questions because there are a few. So the first question is, even you were mentioning that even chanting 128 rounds does not mean that we are qualified. But on the other hand, chanting more rounds is showing an eagerness and showing a sincerity to Krishna. How can I get mercy? See, the point is, we want to understand that we are not qualified, even if you're chanting 256 rounds. That is how Srila Haridas Thakur chanted. He found that he was not even qualified to visit Jagannath Puri temple. Can you imagine? He is the Namacharya. He used to stay far away from others. He never ever thought that he was qualified to be in the Sangha of devotees. So it's not so much a matter of number of rounds. It is not a matter of, how much sadhana. It is the internal state of consciousness that recognizes the profundity of what has been granted. If you've been granted something so amazing, when you realize it, you will also realize that we are not qualified to receive that. Then when that qualification or lack of qualification becomes quite evident and very, I would say, clear to us in our hearts, there will be natural humility. That is the reason why, as we advance, we become humble. It's because we see what is being given to us. And as a consequence, there's natural humility. And there's also fear that what's been given would be taken away. Yeah? That's what I'm trying to talk about. Are there any, this is now second question. Are there any times when the soul exists with the subtle body alone, without a gross body, without being equipped with a physical body? Is the subtle body still capable of doing the same things, hearing, seeing, touching? Yes, the soul can exist with the subtle body alone, and that is called a ghostly existence. The ghostly existence is such that they basically don't have gross senses, but they have desires and they have the subtle senses. So they can't really exercise the same kind of, I would say, interaction with other entities in such situations. That's why ghosts possess someone with a physical body. And because they possess someone with a physical body, they also interact with matter using that physical body of someone else. It's not necessary that it has to be one ghost in one body. I have seen cases where there are multiple, and those people basically would practically be overpowered by the presence of these other entities. Their nervous systems would be used by these entities, all kinds of things. So it's quite a complex situation because it is not very obvious. It can't be seen by modern medicine, but it has similar characteristics as to what we would other challenging disturbances that we see. Similar, not the same. So both can exist. You can have a simple issue, and then you can also have a problem because ghosts are dominating. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that the subtle body on its own is called a gross body. It's called a ghost. It's a ghost. And in fact, the devas, the other personalities, they're all subtle, but then they all have a divine body. There are different personalities with different kinds of bodies. They may be subtle. So the use of the word subtle essentially means that we can't really observe it. Um, um, we can't really observe it. We can't really observe it. Use of the word subtle is we can't really observe it. So for example, everything is subtle. It's unmanifest in that sense. Okay, now I'm going to another question. One moment. Okay, so one moment. Okay, about Panchabhuta, did you say they're always pure, but our senses are impure? Then what will happen? No, I said the Panchabhuta is matter. There is no such thing as what I would call as very pure matter. There are different gradations. There can be matter which is not disturbed, and there can be matter which is disturbed. The distorted nature of matter causes confusion. So basically, we are talking about disturbances in the way things are constituted. Because disturbances in the way things are constituted, as a consequence, we also feel disturbed being in the bodies that are disturbed. Yeah? So matter is not necessarily pure, it can be distorted. Can we see suicide, etc., happening even in the lives of those who have been worshipping Narasimhadev deity for so many years? How to understand that? See, there can be specific circumstances that I do not want to comment on without understanding the full extent of what has been going on. Because from external observation, we see certain things, but from internally, we might have a different understanding altogether. So I can't really comment on something that I don't know fully about. Can nervous breakdown happen when people see the truth by mercy of Guru and Gauranga as they're doing Vani Seva sincerely, but not given a chance to approach Guru? Two different topics. Yeah, two different topics. For example, someone who is very spiritually astute and focused can have cancer. Should we say that devotees cannot have cancer? The answer is no. A pure devotee who is very dear to the Lord can depart in as many expedient ways as the Lord desires. As a consequence, we can't really say that pure devotee means the body shouldn't be disturbed, the body cannot have diseases, etc. It doesn't mean that. It simply means the person is pure, they're not affected by the circumstance, and they're sincerely serving regardless of what circumstances their physical body is in. That's what we need to understand. The second point is a certain disease, such as a nervous breakdown. Can it happen? It can happen because of various reasons, not necessarily the person is either advanced or not advancing. We don't want to mix up calamities of this world with spiritual advancement. Right at the beginning of Srimad Bhāgavatam, we see an entire section where Mother Uttara, who is the wife of the nephew of Krishna, she was a widow. Abhimanyu was the nephew of Krishna. He departed on the battlefield. Is this to say that he wasn't devoted to his uncle? Or the uncle didn't know that his nephew was on the battlefield and he needs to be protected? Yeah? Parikshit Maharaj, in the womb of Uttara, was attacked. Is it to say that Uttara was not protected and was not close to Krishna? So we should never mix up calamities of being in this world with spiritual advancement, because both can coexist. The idea of reading Srimad Bhagavatam is to see how devotees coped with different challenges and yet remained very faithful regardless of what they were going through. That is the challenge of Srimad Bhagavatam. The Supreme Lord Rama, who is to say that he didn't have the power to prevent his wife from being kidnapped? Who is to say that Lakshmi, Mother Sita, could be illusioned by a golden deer? Who is to say that Lord Rama will go chasing after the deer? So what I'm trying to say is that we would want to be careful in extending material suffering and lack thereof to spiritual advancement. One can be spiritually advanced and be free of all problems. One can be spiritually advanced and can have problems, but they can basically not be affected by it. Yeah, that is the study of Srimad Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Question: how would we know if there are ghosts within us? Honestly, there are many symptoms, but I do not want to basically throw a scare by sharing things without knowing whom I'm talking to in an open audience. So what I'm going to do is basically say that we don't need to know if there are ghosts within us. We simply need to surrender and read Shastra and be able to do Harinam and be able to maintain a higher level of consciousness in the mode of goodness. That in turn would allow us to prevent the entry of unwanted entities. So if those are those who are addicted, they go through different kinds of challenges, then they do fall, they do become very vulnerable to such attacks. So there are many symptoms. And the reason I'm not elaborating on it is because, I need to basically be able to assist the person if I'm also giving them information. And I don't want to deal with it in an open forum. So the question that's coming back again is, how can we attract mercy? How can we attract mercy? Is by following in the footsteps of those who have already attracted mercy. That's what we are doing in terms of studying the predecessor acharyas. How did they do it? That's exactly what we're studying. Okay. I believe there are 14 manus in each day of Brahma. Are there different laws for each different manu? What is the purpose of the laws if it is not necessary to follow them? The point is, yes, there are different manus, and there could be different variations of laws depending on the context and the time in which the manu was presiding. There definitely is a need to follow, but these laws themselves deteriorate over the yugas, and we are now in Kali Yuga, where our bodies are weak and the time that is left for us is very little. In this little time, we are also very distracted with objectives that are really not very important, but that confuse us. We believe they're important, we go chasing after them. So in this very short time, we can't really afford to not follow the rules, because that can be problematic. We can't really afford to not have a system. That's why Harinam and the system given by Mahaprabhu is super important. If someone got a taste to chant more and always, is that okay? Yes, absolutely. Even given lesser time for hearing and reading, absolutely. Yeah. If you have a taste for japa, go for it. A lot of things can change. Please explain how to balance all services, as chanting, reading, hearing, all are important, especially reading and discussions give more knowledge. Well, the most important thing is for us to be able to follow the very foundational aspect of what is being given. So we follow what is required in terms of the 16 rounds. We follow what is required in terms of the dharma that is required to exist in the world, in terms of being able to manage the household and doing what is necessary in terms of service, etc. Yeah, we do all of that which is necessary, because that is prudent for us to do. And then we focus on introducing the different aspects of bhakti, and we try and insert it as much as possible. The idea is to do our very best given the circumstances, understanding that the circumstances themselves have also been arranged by the Lord, but we will push ourselves to do very best in the circumstances to excel, so that He opens up and gives us even greater opportunity. So that is what is important. Yeah. So how to balance is, you should start with chanting, because through chanting, there would be a greater degree of understanding of who we are. Greater sambandha means better abhideya. So it's a natural course. It doesn't mean that the other services cannot give you sambandha, but chanting is the yuga dharma, so it will help more, relatively. Dissolving subtle body and developing spiritual body, are these two terms same? Can you please explain a bit if they are different concepts altogether? Dissolving the subtle body is basically dissolving the influence of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, especially the intelligence that is in touch with matter and false ego. That is dissolving the subtle body. The more and more one identifies with their identity in the spiritual sky, there's a deeper level of sambandha. If they know who they are in the spiritual sky, greater would be their ability to overcome the effects of the subtle body. If you're able to transcend the subtle body, at some point you'll become free of the subtle body. Becoming free of the subtle body is essentially the same. And that is also is achieved in our movement through understanding who we are in relationship to Krishna. Yes, if there are questions that you want to WhatsApp me on personally, please do so. All right, so I think these are what I found on chat. I can take one more question, just one more. If anybody has, I'll be happy to assist.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavad Pranam. Wonderful class.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, I was, when we do, I know maybe it's a mundane material comparison and may not be sufficed, but anyway, I'll say, for example, you're studying for a master's or you're studying for a course, you do a certain endeavor, there's a certain protocol, you follow that, and by the end of it, you get certain results. And my question is around mercy, basically. So the same here, we also follow a certain sadhana, we get up in the morning, we chant, and whatever, like for a certain results. But none of those really matter in one sense, like what you say, it's all about down to mercy. I'm trying to...
Okay, so I think I need to qualify this. When I said down to mercy, the answer is yes. It is down to mercy, but it doesn't mean we are inactive. We do as much as we need to and beyond, but with always the understanding that it is never going to be our action that's going to qualify us, but it is going to be mercy. Positioning ourselves for mercy is like, for example, someone who is in a well and he's being drawn down, he's drowning, someone is throwing a rope. Now, how efficient are we going to be in holding on to the rope? How singularly focused and sincere are we going to be in terms of holding on to the rope? That matters too. So in the context of basically contribution from ourselves, we at the very least need to endeavor to be able to do what is required of us and even beyond. That is what draws mercy. But to think that what we have done is the reason why we are going where we are going, that's wrong. That's the point I'm trying to make. That's
again,
the difference.
It's coming to humility again, because humility is a key factor. So if the fact that it's because you're doing what you're doing is coming again to pride, so then that is counterproductive anyway.
Yeah, well, humility, yes, absolutely. But you see, humility in our circumstance is fundamentally a circumstance where we basically do what is required because we have been given an environment, we have been given a certain body, we have been given a certain kind of relationship, we have been given a certain economic circumstance. We tolerate the circumstance. Taroriva sahish. We act upon it. Yeah, Trinadapi Sunichena. We accept it, saying, Krishna, you've arranged it. Okay, I'm accepting. This is what you want me to experience. Then we act upon it, tolerating the circumstance. And then we do our very best as if it depends on us. So humility is about accepting what Krishna has imposed upon us. Without humility, we would become angry, we would become upset, we will fight with him, we will do all kinds of things. But if we accept the circumstances of life and say, this is who my circumstances are, this is basically arranged by the Lord, then automatically we are acting on the platform of humility and we can push forward and do our very best. Because accepting the environment is the first step in humility.
But humility also can be how great Krishna is and how insignificant we are on the grand scheme of things.
Yes, it can be. It can be. See, the problem is that it is an experience. You see, humility is an experience. It's a state of mind. It is consciousness. But how do we start in the journey of humility? I'm trying to get there because we oftentimes hear the word humility. What is the best way to start humility? The best way for us to move forward in the circumstance of humility is to first accept our circumstances as being arranged by the Lord. The day we accept that our own circumstances in life have been arranged by the Lord, that is the first step in humility. And then we tolerate the circumstances. Then we will have the ability to move forward. Yeah. So this is the first step. This is the first active principle. Yeah. And this principle itself will teach us a lot more and it will bring us much closer. You see? This is the beauty of Krishna consciousness. This is the principal teaching as well.
Yeah.
It's an experience, Mataji. That's the point I'm trying to make. And you have to start with accepting your life and your environment first, as if it has been arranged by the Lord, and acting upon it fully. That is basically the idea of humility. Now, let's talk a little bit about relative humility.
Mm.
Do you think Arjuna was humble?
Yeah.
Yeah. How come?
Because in relative humility, the fact that he took the instructions, I mean, he's the greatest warrior, he took the instructions of Krishna and followed it. He didn't want to fight with his family, but then he accepted that situation at that point for the ultimate, that for that, because it was the ordain of the Lord.
Yes, this is basically the point I'm trying to make.
Humility,
What I'm trying to what I'm trying to make is Arjuna was not humble by demeanor.
No.
He was not groveling on the ground. He was not, falling on the ground and, doing all those things. He wasn't doing anything of that thing, but he had accepted the environment on the battlefield of Kurukshetra as if the Lord himself had arranged it. That was his humility. And I'm saying we have to start there.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Sometimes humility is also like used cheaply or very, very low, in a very, oh, I'm nobody. You ask them to do a service. Oh, no, I'm not capable of doing it. It's taken very, the word humility is taken very.
Yes, it can be, because, there can be false ego, which can make us think we are too big. There can be false ego that makes us think we are too small.
Yeah.
So false ego has its own, I would say, characteristics and
flavor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very enlightening. Nice class.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Is being grateful can be the first phase of humility? I guess it's a close definition. Yes, because if you accept your environment and if you accept what has been arranged exactly around you, as if Krishna has arranged it, and you become grateful and you filled with gratitude, then that's humility. You see, I was talking to someone recently who practices they were practicing the Catholic faith. They are practicing Catholics, you see. And I was basically saying that Lord Jesus could never have forgiven those who perpetrated harm on him if he was suffering. He was able to forgive because he was not suffering. He was in pain. There was no doubt. He was crucified. He had all kinds of wounds on his body, so he was in a lot of pain. But he was not suffering. He was in a lot of pain. The reason he was not suffering was because he had accepted that particular state as the Lord's arrangement to such an extent that he did not experience suffering, even though there was so much pain. So that's a decent example of understanding how one can accept one's life as if it is the Lord's arrangement, and then you act upon it with courage. And that practical implementation of life can lead one to basically move forward and understand other aspects of humility, because you will be humbled, and each and every instance as life turns around, you keep accepting it, and then you basically transform it spiritually, and you keep ingesting it. And then as you move forward, you will understand what is it the Lord has arranged, and you will move forward. Yeah. So I was just giving this example of Jesus to her, and she was able to relate to it because she was practicing Catholic. She was a practicing Catholic, so she was able to kind of get into it. So the point is that that's what you're supposed to do. A Vaishnava is supposed to accept life as if the Lord has arranged it, and then act upon it courageously, tolerating the circumstances. This is the definition of Trinadapi Sunichena Taruriva Sahishnuna. This gives us the ability to chant. So if you're looking for qualities that allow you to chant, this is where you have to begin. You have to begin by accepting life. And it doesn't mean that there is not going to be pain, because being in a material body, being in the material world, is an existence that can give you and bring you in touch with pain all the time. But one need not suffer. One can be in pain, but one need not suffer. The only times we will not suffer, even though we are in pain, is when we understand that one who really loves us, the Lord, has created these circumstances for us to come closer to Him, and we also experience that proximity. Then we don't suffer. There's a big difference between suffering and pain. Sometimes people have a wound, sometimes traumatic emotional wound, sometimes it can be a traumatic physical wound. The traumatic emotional and physical wound can heal, but they will continue suffering because they remember that. Yeah, 5 years hence, 6 years hence, it's already gone, but there's so much remembrance and there's so much suffering. The pain has ended, the suffering goes on. Sometimes the suffering ends even when there's pain. We have to learn that there's a distinction between suffering and pain. And we have to learn to tolerate the pain, accepting that it is the Lord's arrangement. And the moment we start accepting that there's a Lord's arrangement, it will become the Lord's arrangement. And then we would be forward, and we'll come closer and closer to understanding a position with Him. This is the first chapter and the first canto of Srimad Bhāgavatam. There's so much suffering by the devotees of the Lord. So much suffering. But were they in pain? No, they were not were they suffering? Sorry, they were not. They were in pain. There was a lot of pain. Mother Uttara was in pain. Mother Kunti was in pain. She had lost Karna. She had lost her grandchildren. All the Pandavas were in pain because there was so much losses in terms of all of this. But were they suffering? They were not. They were saying, "You're not suffering because you're with us." So this is the first lesson for us to be able to move forward in Srimad Bhāgavatam. Tolerate our circumstances and accept the circumstances as Krishna's arrangement. Then what would happen is it will become Krishna's arrangement, and then we would be able to process life efficiently as we move forward. This is very important. That's why we have to start with humility as a practical implementation, accept life as if Krishna has arranged it. It will become His arrangement. This is the teaching. All right. Yeah, I got to stop. So because we'll continue again. And we will meet again the following session, and we will try and see, maybe in the next couple of chapters we will conclude second canto, and then we'll summarize, and then we'll begin the third canto as well. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam and the glorious movement of Lord Chaitanya. All glories.